Okay, so pandemic. So we all unfortunately have now experience with this type of disaster. And so you all have, you all are experts in that sense, and you all have deep experience dealing with all the different dimensions of one particular pandemic. Here's where we are as of a couple weeks ago. So the current estimate is somewhere north of about 7 million people died from exposure to this virus. Obviously, many other people were harmed and impacted. And so the dashboard here says about a little shy of 800 million people were confirmed infected. Probably many more, right? Not everybody had tests, especially in the early days and all that kind of stuff. But we're probably realistically on the order of 1 billion, if not more people were infected. Is anybody here not been? Is anybody here not had COVID yet? One. I've supposedly not gotten COVID. A couple times I thought I had it, but every time I tested, it never came up. So theoretically, I've never gotten it, but I'm sort of skeptical. But yeah, we're weird. We're weird people. Like almost everybody else has gotten it multiple times. And how many people have gotten it 3 or more times? Nobody? Oh, interesting. So normally I get people with multiple stuff. Okay, so good. So glad everybody here made it through relatively unscathed. It was hard for all of us in many different dimensions, but we'll come back to this. We'll talk about this in a little bit. But let's start talking about a couple other diseases that have caused problems. So I don't like to talk about politics, but this is going to get a little political just because this whole thing has become insanely political. It's nuts to me that a public health thing is somehow involved with politics, but that's the world we're in. So I didn't show you guys. Did I show you guys this before? No. Okay. All right. So this is a story. So I'm heading back to Turkey in a few days to do some more work there. This is from very early days of my work in Turkey. And so this picture on the left is a picture from a village. So this is a village near the Armenian and Iranian border in Turkey. So this is far east Turkey. And this is, Turkey's sort of divided into effectively 2 countries. There's the capital, Ankara, in sort of the middle of the country, and then the west. And that's like going to Europe. That's a modern country with, you feel like you're in a regular European city kind of thing. And then there's the country from essentially the middle to the east, and that's a much less developed country. Much of the economy is subsistence farming. So folks just farming wheat or something to get enough food so they can live and maybe sell a little teeny bit of it. So very, very contrasting. So I work in the eastern part of the country. So this is when we had one of our previous H5N1, which you guys know is bird flu, or sometimes called swine flu sometimes. But this infectious virus that can be lethal, and that is moves between mammals and birds. So it's jumped out of the birds, and then it causes problems in cows and people and stuff like that. In this case, this big eruption was happening, and it was burning its way around the world, actually, but in this part of the Middle East, etc. Okay, so this hits on a lot of our disaster themes, right? So see how many themes you guys can pick up on. So first and foremost, so we're driving through this village. This is this particular one is a Turkish village, but there's Turkish villages and Kurdish villages and in different communities. A very low income. So in the back there, it looks like some rocks and stuff. There are a few rocks, but mostly a lot of the building materials are dried cow manure that they cover in plant material, so it doesn't erode in the rains. But this is just a dirt street. There's very little development, etc. So we were asked by some friends, some folks that are studying this to go see if we could. And so one of the things I do there is work on wetland restoration and work on sustainable conservation and that kind of stuff. And so this was one of our trips where we're cruising around looking at different sites when we were early on in the early days trying to figure out where we wanted to set up some of our monitoring sites. And so this guy said, hey, can you guys get some bird samples? And we're like, sure, why not, right? So there's a wetland out where this village was, and it sort of is far away, so like a big lake. And so there's a lot of migratory waterfowl. And so these waterfowl were considered one of the vectors for spreading H5N1. As with everything in disasters, there's sort of the initial story and then the real story. So it's true that migratory waterfowl absolutely spread bird flu. But the main source of this, the main breeding ground, the main place that amplifies it and everything, are not wild populations. They are captive raised populations. So think industrial chicken farms and poultry farms and stuff like that. That's really where the disease really ramps up and just explodes and becomes super abundant. This was near where some of the first cases showed up in the country of Turkey. And so these guys said, hey, can you guys go get us some blood samples from these birds? And we're like, sure. And so we started driving out. And turns out it was kind of raining, and we were in this like little rented minivan. It just was like a regular minivan. It wasn't like four-wheel drive or anything. And it was pretty clear we couldn't get out to this area. We'd get stuck in the mud, and there's nobody around to pull us out. So we weren't able to get the dead bird samples for these CDC researcher folks. So we were coming back, and we came through the village. And as we're coming through the village, it turns out it was midday. And so in these small villages, this is public school, in these small villages, everybody goes home for lunch. So there isn't like a cafeteria. So all the kids started coming out. So these kids are all dressed up. So in Turkey, everybody wears a uniform to school, and the same uniform. So it's all a standardization thing. So these guys were out of school, and they were walking home to go have lunch before afternoon classes, and we were driving through. And of course, all my friends are Turkish, and I'm the one weird American guy, and they don't normally see weird bald white guys like me going around. And so we're driving around, and the kids are like, "What's up with this? Who are these weird people driving through our village?" And so we start saying hello and everything. They thought it was very interesting. I said, "Hey," to my friend, "Hey, can you take a picture of me with the kids?" And he's like, "Sure." So I jump out, and what you see is all the boys go around me, right? And these two girls are standoffish, and they're in the back. I was like, come on, come up. And they're like, no. And so this is, there's a lot of, so this part of Turkey is also very conservative, and there's a lot of very conservative Islamic traditions and things of that nature about clothing and comportment and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought, oh, these little girls didn't want to be near this weird dude, right? And so my friends started taking pictures, and we took a bunch of pictures. And then the people, which we don't have pictures of, people started coming out of out of their houses in the alley and start yelling at us. And it's Turkish, so it's hard to know if they're angry or just talking, because there's a lot of gesticulation is the way that my Turkish friends talk. And they're like, and then my friends in the van are like, back, and then people are like, and now there's more and more people coming out in the street. And they're like, it's pretty clear, they're like pointing, like, get the hell out of here, like, go away. And I'm like, to my friend, like, what's up? He's like, I don't understand. They're really angry at us, and they seem to be really angry at you. And I was like, well, what did I do? And he's like, I don't know. And now like people are yelling, and it's getting really sort of not a good situation. So we're like, okay, fine, we're gone. So we just, and they were talking about stop taking pictures. I'm like, okay, so we drive away. And we're like, what the hell's going on? So we turn the corner, and this is on the way out of the village. This is what we see in this little courtyard area of like a little small wall. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just in this picture, there's 7 chickens. And then when we go back and look at the photos, what I took to be these young ladies being standoffish is actually, if you look in her hands, she has eggs in her hands. So what was going on, it wasn't like the weird white dude, it was that outsiders showed up and were taking pictures and they had eggs. So at this point, what has happened is because a young boy's already died from, I believe what happened was they cut off the head of a goose for eating, and the kid was playing soccer with the head of the animal and seems to have gotten some blood on him, and then got the swine flu and then passed away, unfortunately. So WHO is like, oh my God, we have to cull all of the population, right? We have to kill all of the bird populations to stop the spread of the virus. And so now again, it was just sort of getting going back in this day. It's gotten much more sophisticated in the last 15 years about authoritarian control and lack of democratic ideals and all that kind of stuff. But suffice it to say, I should also say that Turkey is a cool place, really neat culture, all kinds of good stuff going on there, but not the wealthiest country in the world, right? So they have aspirations to be more economically robust, but they don't have all the money they'd like to. And so when this happened, the answer was, you poor farmers, you kill all of your food-generating animals, and then we'll pay you money. But, and it's been so long, I can't remember the exact dollar, but it was something like, we'll pay you something like, I don't know, like $2 a chicken or something like that, right? They could take just the eggs from that chicken and go to the market, on Sunday or Wednesday or whenever it is, and probably sell that for $4 or $5 a week. So we were giving them pennies on the dollar for something that, one, is food for them, and two, is one of the few sources of potential money that they could use to sell that, get some money and then buy some sugar or whatever it is, right? So if the incentives had been properly structured, if they had said, hey, we're going to give you $10 per chicken, oh my God, boom, every chicken around would be dead as far as we could see, right? But instead, they, as we often see in these crisis situations, the folks making the decision did not understand what was going on, on the ground with people experiencing the trauma and the challenges. So what happened was everybody took a few chickens and they went up to the government inspector and went, here are my chickens, okay, shoot, wish I could keep some, but okay. And then once the inspector left town, all the chickens come out, right? Come back out, and chickens and geese. And so that's great from the perspective of these folks having food, not great from the perspective of trying to stop a global pandemic, right? So you can have all the great modeling in the world, all the great stuff, but when it comes down to that face-to-face, are we getting people help? Are the people getting the help they need? Do they have the information that they need? That is absolutely critical. And in this case, there was a huge breakdown. And so what had happened was we just sort of drove in, and they were not expecting us to drive in, and they were upset that we might narc on them to the authorities, essentially what was going on. And then this is today. This is avian flu right now in the U.S. So these are all counties where we've recorded what you guys now here refer to as bird flu. This is another variant of this H5 virus, but it's basically everywhere, right? It's basically everywhere where we have any kind of poultry, livestock, ag type of operations. So that's bird flu. This is not a pandemic, but something that is beginning to border on epidemic status, potentially, unfortunately, is measles. So a great triumph of modern public health has been the development of vaccines and these incredibly powerful tools that teach our immune system to recognize a problematic invader inside our body, and but we're ready for it. So the vaccines get our immune system ready so that when that bad guy shows up inside of us, we're ready to go and we can attack it really quickly and either have no disease or have a much more milder version of the disease and rarely die, for example, from it. And so that was the case with measles. Measles, the vaccine was finally finished testing and all that kind of stuff, and was begun to be introduced to the American public in 1963. So if we look at the years just before 1963, in the U.S. we're getting several million cases of measles a year. We are getting somewhere on the order of 400, 500 people dying every year from measles directly. We're having something on the order of, about 50,000-ish hospital people that are so ill they have to go to the hospital to be taken care of with respirators or whatever the intervention is. And about 1,000 of those folks actually got encephalitis. This is brain swelling. This is so much infection that their body is having a hard time dealing with it, and they're experiencing brain swelling, and that can cause long-term disabilities, can cause problems with memory, can cause all kinds of issues, brain damage, and et cetera. And this is every year before the vaccine. So then we got the vaccine, and then a huge triumph of public health is now to get this to everybody. Everybody gets vaccinated, and the incidence of measles begins to go down. We've reversed that trend. So we're going in the opposite direction now. So this is from this morning, this is what your CDC website tells you about measles right now. So how many states are affected, how many counties are affected, how many reported outbreaks, right? You can click through to some static maps and stuff, but this is not, I would argue from first pass, this is not a really super engaging data visualization, not a super engaging showcasing information. This seems to be a pretty vanilla, pretty mellow. This is new. This is our current administration's approach to informing you about what's going on with the current outbreak. And all kinds of stories have come out, and we've touched on this a little bit in this class, but all kinds of stories coming out about the DOGE cuts, the change in personnel, et cetera, the anti-science vibe that's now taking hold in Health and Human Services and a lot of these other entities that are impacting our response to things like bird flu and the measles. And that is not a good thing. And this is not one person saying this. This is a huge chorus of folks. And we're now starting to see large-scale organizations, national organizations, medical, associations of doctors, et cetera, public health professionals saying, like, this is bad. This is not just a little change in approach or perspective. This is like really, really bad. And so we have things like our head of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., saying things like, well, what we should do is we can identify the birds that are infected. We can identify the birds and preserve the birds that are immune to it. So we just let that disease burn through all the birds, and that's a good thing, because then the birds that live will be resistant. That's a very different perspective. So that's the perspective of, you all just die from COVID, and then the folks that survive, you'll be okay, right? That is not, that's a massive divergence from how we approach public health, how we approach equity, how we approach taking care of our fellow beings. But yet that's the person that's in charge of all this stuff for us. Interesting, this comes from an interview on Fox News. So I try to go get the video to show you guys, and for some reason, when you go to Fox News, you can't find that, even though you put the direct quote in, it says there's no such stories that appeared in that venue, which is interesting. I wonder why that might be. Here's...
You should let the disease go through them and identify the birds that survive, which are the birds that probably have a genetic inclination for immunity. And those should be the birds that we breed like the wild population.
So that was the quote. That was the quote, right? Respectfully, no. We shouldn't let everybody die and just say it's cool, right? Particularly when we have the tools to do something about it, right? Particularly when we have the ability to monitor who might be at risk, to sort of understand how we can intervene with disease. And our whole modern public health infrastructure is designed to help avoid suffering and avoiding people passing away from disease. And this argument is essentially let the disease do what it's going to do and just sit around. Where we are right now is last year in all the US, we had 285 reported cases of the measles. And again, that is growing. So this has been getting, so in 2000, we had a low point, which was great. And it seemed like maybe we were going to possibly eradicate measles in the US. No, we've started reversing course. And so last year we had 285 people infected. Just as in the first 115 days of this year, we have 884. Unfortunately, now there's 3 kids that have died from this, and it seems very likely, unfortunately, more folks are going to pass away, right? So that's where we are in 2025. Here are the cases up to 2025 in the U.S. And so we see that, again, so here we have this background rate, right? And then we have again, as I mentioned, the introduction in 1963 of the public vaccine. And then it just basically starts crashing. There's some ups and downs. Basically, it's crashing, crashing, crashing. And then we start in the modern anti-vax movement. And then we hit COVID, and then it just, again, this is only a little bit of the data for this year. So this year we're almost certainly going to be much, much higher as data continues to come in. We're also not collecting data in the same way we were. So that's also a bit of a challenge. So this is our person in charge of health care for us.
I can't listen to myself on TV. I will not listen to this. So whatever you say.
That makes 2 of us. My mother, when she found out you were coming on, she's a big Democrat, she says, he's dangerous. He's an anti-vaxxer. He says that autism comes from vaccines, and you must challenge him on that, Jesse. Is my mom crazy?
Well, I do believe that autism does come from vaccines. But I think most of the things that people believe about my opinions about vaccines are wrong. All I've said about vaccines, we should have good science. We should have the same kind of testing, placebo-controlled trials that we have for every other medication. Vaccines are exempt from pre-licensing placebo-controlled trials, so that there's no way that anybody can tell the risk profile of those products or even the relative benefits of those products before they're mandated. And we should have that kind of testing. I think so most people agree.
My kids got vaccinated. Are they going to have problems?
Well, do they have problems now?
Well, they have problems because I'm their father, but not those types of problems. Tell me about Fauci. You wrote this big, fat book. I could only get through a little bit of it. I can't read anything longer than 700 pages. And you think Fauci's the devil. Would you prosecute him if you ever got to the White House?
I mean, if there were crimes that he committed, of course, we would, I would tell the Attorney General to prosecute him and not hold off. Do I think that he committed crimes? I think he caused a lot of injury. I think that he, particularly by withholding early treatment from Americans, we racked up the highest death count in the world.
So that's not true. It sounds very reasonable. No, I didn't say that. No. So I met this guy about 8 years ago, and just briefly, seemed like a nice guy, right? Didn't seem like an insane person or an anti-science person. Very effective spreader of misinformation, right? Very effective to look respectable, to smile nicely at the cameras, that kind of stuff. That's a really good way to sort of get into people's good graces. This is one of the, if not the loudest voices for not vaccinating people, certainly in our country, possibly the world. And this argument that he just said is complete baloney. We massively test vaccines. We massively test them. All the things he talked about, we do that and more. So this argument that, oh, it's just I think we should follow the best science. But we do. We do. This is a person that does not want to follow the best science. So the supposed tie to autism is completely debunked. There is no truth in it. It's been examined many, many times. The study that he's talking about, that author with a very small sample size, and at the kind of science that if you guys turn it into me as a final report, it would have gotten an F. The journal that published it has since retracted it. That gentleman has lost his medical license. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because that idea is out there now. And so all the, yoga moms in Malibu and all the conspiracy theorists over there, they're like, well, hey, maybe there's something to this, right? And so this plays on the fears, which comes out, again, as we've talked about in our disaster context, when we're in a stressful situation, when we're in that pandemic, we see these small fractures or these smaller fractures that exist in our society break open. So that's what happened. And to write a book saying we should prosecute Fauci, and then someone says we should prosecute Dr. Fauci, and the answer, oh no, I didn't say that. Only if he did something wrong, right? That's a classic tool of the misinformation crowd. So here's just another little clip. Not we want to be too political, but I think it's important that you guys see
Kennedy's
this. So yeah, you guys can go watch the whole show if you really want to. But so this again is the person in charge of are dealing with the bird flu and measles and stuff. Does not inspire confidence. So this is the organization, one of the organizations that he used to head before he became Health and Human Services Secretary. And this is a massive anti-vax group. So just to give you one sense of how some folks are responding to this, as I mentioned, it started with this, unfortunately, this young boy that contracted measles and then unfortunately passed away. This group has staged an online fundraising campaign, get funds, and they've gone to West Texas and they're giving a vitamin A and all these other things to folks that have infected children or members of their family with the idea that, this stuff will work. All that vaccine stuff, don't believe that, but here's some vitamin A. It's insane. And so this gentleman, Ben Edwards, has a wellness clinic in Lubbock, Texas, and he's one of the big guys. So he's one of the big pushers of this stuff. So here's a little quote from him.
Used to get measles. The body's designed to kill measles. Vitamin A and vitamin C studies have been published showing it improves the outcomes in measles. We don't need to be fearful of measles. We need to be informed.
So he's arguing that when you're in the hospital and you're seriously hurting, there has been some studies that shown that when you get, because one of the things it does is it screws with your body's ability to, it basically depletes your vitamin A reservoirs in your body. And so one of the responses, if you're doing really poorly, is to give you vitamin A. That's not to cure the disease, right? That's so that you don't die from it. And so there's this massive conflation of a little prick of partial information and then blown up. And that you can trust me, don't trust everybody else. And so when you have groups actively raising money around the country to provide misinformation and counter narratives to people that are scared and don't know how to navigate this disaster, that's a recipe that can only go badly. In the most ideal situation, you're at least going to create uncertainty. And that is dangerous, right? Not that people shouldn't be free thinkers, of course they should, but this is people that actually are actively trying to mislead folks in terms of this stuff. Okay, what's happened in the last few weeks is Mr. Kennedy has come out and said, shockingly, that vaccines are an effective way to. After he talked about a bunch of other things you can take, cod liver oil, fish oil, all this kind of stuff, that because there was so much pressure on him, he came out and said, you could get a vaccine, basically. But the damage is being done from having this person with this giant bullhorn in charge of essentially in charge of this disaster for us, right, at the national level. So we're starting to get things like this, which is in Minnesota, a new bill has been introduced that would criminalize the mRNA virus. One of the key ways we were able to respond, or key technologies, excuse me, we're able to respond to the COVID pandemic so fast and do it so quickly and have the vaccine produced so, in record time, to legally label this fantastic technology that we've all paid for and has been developed for decades and decades with basic research funded mostly by the US government, the Centers for Disease Control and National Institutes of Health, as weapons of mass destruction. I mean, this is insane. This is like saying the firefighters are evil thugs, coming to my house to put the fire out. How dare they put the fire out? And so this is unfortunately the world that we have to deal with now in terms of this type of pandemic. So with that sort of intro, before we start talking a bit more about COVID and some of these other things, I wanted to do a little exercise with you guys. So I sent a link in the announcements just before class. And so we'll take just like, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. And what I want you guys to do is, so normally when we do our searches, right, I say, hey, incognito browser, use DuckDuckGo, right? We don't want your history to color anything, right? We don't want your browser, that knows you like the environment or whatever, right? This time, let's not do that. So this time, just go ahead and open whatever browser you have on your device, whatever your favorite jam is, and I want you guys to search. So I want you to find 10 links. And for something about bird flu, you can search for just bird flu, or you could search for some variant or whatever, and then 10 links of measles.